Okay, so I think we have covered almost all the AI related functionalities in the previous tutorials. So let's try to implement the resource depletion features as well. Right? So as you can see, currently these characters are mining the resources, but no resources are getting depleted. Right? They are infinitely exist as it is, and these workers can mine infinite amount of resources. So this is fine, but if you need a resource depletion feature in your game, I think it's better to have such a feature. Then it will be more fun to play. So in order to add that functionality, we have to go to the natural resources and natural resource base, and here we have this function called harvest. So in the harvest function, what we basically do, we collect the amount and we reduce the collected units at that specific resource, right? And if this available resource units are 0 or lesser than 0, then we should deplete the resources by destroying that specific actor, right? So that's what we are going to do today. So instead of directly returning this value like this, maybe I'll first add a sequence, and let's check whether our available resources are less than or equal to 0, right? Less than or equal to 0. If it is, then we have to deplete our resources. So we can create a function called maybe deplete resource, and for now I will just simply destroy the actor. But if you have animations related to these resources, maybe you can play those resource animations, right? Maybe like the trees are chopping down, or maybe stones are breaking apart, things like that. But for the demonstration purposes, I will just simply destroy the actor in order to represent the resource depletion, and then we can call that function over here, and after depleting the resources we can return our values, right? So this function not necessary to be called every time, right? This will be called only when we are having limited number of or let's say we are not having required amount of resources at the resource instance. Okay, so in order to test this thing, maybe let's start our testing with this farming girl. So what are the available units at these things? Okay, so I think almost all the instances are having 100 resource available units, and our farming girl, which is exists at the characters base, no, characters workers with the farmer, can mine 30 amount of resources, right? So just for the testing, I'll increment it to the 50, right? So basically after harvesting 2 times, this specific resource should get depleted, right? Because a farmer can mine at most 15 resources, and these resource units or resource instances are having 100 available resource units, right? So after 2 iterations, that specific resource should be destroyed. So let's check this thing. How to play it again. Okay, she's moving and start harvesting. Maybe this camera zoom range, I'll decrement it further, right? So we can actually zoom much closer in the game. Maybe test this thing out again. Camera zoom range, zoom in out. Maybe let's try to make it 100. Try to play. Yeah, it's always stopping at that position. Maybe spring arm. Yeah, for now let's keep it as 300. And yeah, seems fine. And let's try to maybe simulate it. Okay, she is harvesting. Okay, 15 units harvested, processed. Move again, and 15 units harvesting. Okay, now you can see that resource instance has got deleted, and she's moving to a new resource, right? Because that resource has been depleted. And she's harvested again, processed, and move again. Okay, it's also get depleted. Right. So this is how we can do the resource depletion. And maybe I can. Okay. I have an issue about the reference. Find the resources. Okay. Ending killing. Yeah. Yeah. So this is the issue actually. Then after we destroy that specific actor, it is still exists at this nearby resource list, that dangling pointer, or that zombie instance is still at this list. So we have to clear that thing out, otherwise when it's searching for new resource at for each loop, it try to read that value, but it's not pointing to a actual instance, right? Because it has been destroyed. Yeah, so maybe yeah, maybe let me check my documentation quickly. And yeah, so at the natural resource base, let's add a new function maybe, which is a built-in event called on destroyed. No, there should be an event called, yeah, event destroyed. So actually this is a inbuilt function in Unreal Engine that can be used to call a specific sequence of functionalities when this character or when this instance getting destroyed, right? So we can use this event to clear out that instance at our nearby resource list, right? So I'll close these things, and yeah, so this is that list, right? And it is referencing over here. Okay. So at the natural resource base, when it get destroyed, um, maybe yeah. Okay. So maybe I should have some reference about who are the workers that are working on this specific resource, right? So how can I know that exactly? So maybe I'll create a list called current worker list, and they are basically in this pp worker base format, and it should be a list. And let's create a function called add current worker. So we should ultimately add a unique element to this list, and this is a worker, and where we can add this thing. Basically at the worker base, in the event graph, we have this function, right? Event arrived at resources, or maybe search for resources, right? The search for resources, basically we find a new resource and add it as a current target resource. So maybe over here we can call that function, right? But okay, let's check the find nearest resource function. Okay. Wait, let me quickly check my documentation first. Yeah. Um, so actually, we can add that unique value at over here, right? So in the reached resource, we can add current worker, and this is just a self-reference, right? And at the VP natural resource base, now it populating this list. And after that, basically we can iterate to this list, right, for each loop. So we will be having, right, so now we have reference for each current worker, and then Wait, let me quickly check my documentation again. Yeah, and then if this work instance is valid, then on destroyed we have to set our current target resource as null, because now there is no current target resource because it has got deleted. So I'll comment this thing as, let's say, invalidate current target resource of the workers, right? And then we have to remove that resource referencing at the home resource building base as the nearest resource list, right? So let's get the home resource building reference of a worker, and if it is valid, then we have to remove that element from that nearest resource list. But first, let's create a function at the resource building base called remove nearby resource, and this should remove an element or item from this list, which is nearby resource list. And I'll name the input parameter as resource. So now we can call that function at the BP natural resource base under the home resource building reference. So let's call that remove nearby resource function. And this is exactly a self reference, right? Because this is the instance that you are get deleted. So the self reference will be passed to over here. Now ultimately that zombie element will be removed from this list. Okay. So I'll comment this thing called maybe remove the resource from current nearby resources of the resource building. Okay, so let's try to play it again. And now let's wait until at least one resource get depleted. Okay, harvesting again and go back, and now it search for a new resource. Okay, and harvesting, process, and let me stop over here. Yeah, now it's not returning any errors because we are dereferencing our destroyed instances properly, right, at this on destroyed event. Okay, so this is how we can implement the resource depletion, and maybe we can parameterize this depletion functionality at the natural resource level, which is harvesting, right? So this is the functionality which is responsible for depleting the resources. So maybe I'll create a variable called enable resource depletion, and it's a boolean variable, a single value, and if I pass it using a branch, and whenever I enable it, it will deplete the resources. Right? So I can move it to the setup category and I'll create it as instant editable. And by default I'll keep it as true. But let's say if you wanted a specific resource that shouldn't be depleted, and let's say it should be available infinite amount of resource units, then all you have to do is disable this resource depletion tick over here, so it will not get destroyed after finishing these available resource units. Right? It will be forever available. Yeah, so that's how we can perform the resource depletion. And maybe in the next tutorial, let's see how we can implement some UI functionalities, maybe let's say a resource bar, and how we can persist those values, things like that. So yeah, so I'll see you in the next tutorial, and thank you.